I will never be your slave, she screamed as the cowboy broke her chains. Elena sat on the cold, dusty floor of the small room, her hands tied tightly behind her back. The faint light from a single cracked window barely reached the corners of the place. She could hear the sounds of the outside world, wind rustling through the dry grass, the distant bark of a dog, and the occasional clatter of hooves from a nearby road. Every sound reminded her of the world outside, the one she longed to return to, a world where she could make her own choices and walk freely under the sun. But here, in this cramped and harsh space, she felt trapped, like a bird whose wings had been clipped. Her life had not always been like this. Elena remembered the mornings she had spent in her family's small house, helping her mother bake bread and tend to the garden. The sun would rise, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, and everything had felt safe and bright. She had friends she could laugh with, a brother who teased her endlessly, and neighbors who greeted her warmly. But life had a way of changing when you least expected it, and a single moment could turn safety into fear. It had been 2 months since she had been taken. Buck. 2 months of being forced into work she did not want to do, under the strict watch of a man whose temper was as sharp as a knife. Her days had started before sunrise, filled with chores that left her hands raw and her body aching. Bert. The man who held her had little patience, and his anger could flare without warning. Elena learned to stay quiet, to do what was asked without complaint, but the silence weighed heavily on her. She longed for freedom, for even a single day when she could choose what to do with her life. Despite the fear that pressed against her chest like a heavy stone, Elena refused to let her spirit break. She spent her nights imagining escape, studying the routines of her captors and planning small steps toward freedom. She memorized the sounds of the guards' footsteps, the moments when the doors would be left slightly ajar, and the places where the shadows could hide her. Each small observation became a piece of a larger puzzle, and she held on to the hope that one day she could put it all together and find a way out. In the quiet hours, Elena would talk to herself, whispering words of encouragement. "You are stronger than you think," she would say. "You will get out. You will be free." It was a ritual that kept her mind sharp and her heart brave. Sometimes she would even hum softly a tune from her childhood that reminded her of sunny afternoons in her family garden. The sound seemed to make the room feel a little less cold, a little less like a prison. The people around her were a constant reminder of how carefully she had to move. The guards watched her every move, their eyes sharp and unyielding. One wrong step, one careless word, and the punishment could be swift. Elena learned to read their moods, to sense when anger was near, and to adjust her behavior accordingly. It was exhausting, but it was also a skill she had honed out of necessity. Every day was a test of patience, every interaction a battle to maintain her dignity. Even in this dark place, Elena found small moments of beauty. She noticed the way the sun would strike the wall in the morning, casting a golden line across the floor. She noticed the sound of birds outside, their songs reaching her ears through the cracks in the walls. These moments reminded her that life still existed beyond the chains, that there was a world waiting for her. They were small gifts, and she treasured them like precious jewels. Breath. Elena's mind often wandered to thoughts of escape, imagining how she would run, what she would wear, and where she would go. Raven felt into the open fields, feeling the wind on her face and knowing that no one could stop her. She imagined meeting kind people who would help her, animals that would cross her path, and a sky so wide and free it made her heart ache. These dreams were her lifeline, the reason she refused to give up, even when exhaustion weighed heavily on her body. But hope was dangerous too. It made the long days feel even longer, the cold nights harsher, and the chains more oppressive.
Elena had to learn to balance hope with caution, dreaming carefully so as not to give away her plans.
She had seen others try and fail, and she knew the cost of a single mistake. Still, she could not let the fire inside her die out. It was that fire that kept her eyes bright, that kept her heart beating with courage, and that reminded her she was not a slave in spirit, no matter what the chains said. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Elena heard a strange sound outside. But it was not the familiar clatter of hooves or the bark of a dog. This sound was softer, deliberate, and it carried a weight of purpose. She held her breath, listening carefully, her heart pounding in her chest. Could it be someone coming to help her? Or was it a trap? Another test of her strength. Her instincts told her to stay still, to hide in the shadows, but her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, freedom was near. Elena pressed her back against the cold wall, trying to make herself as small as possible. The sound grew closer, a rhythm she could follow, a presence she could sense. Her mind raced with questions and possibilities. Who could it be? How could they know she needed help? And most importantly, could she trust them? Trust was a luxury she had not been allowed to have for a long time, and yet something about the sound filled her with a cautious hope. That night, Elena lay on the floor, her eyes staring at the ceiling, thinking about what freedom would feel like. She imagined the wind in her hair, the warmth of the sun on her skin, and the joy of speaking words without fear, breath. She imagined walking down a road where no one could stop her, where every step was hers alone. The thought made her heart ache, but it also gave her strength. She knew that if the chance came, she would take it, no matter the risks. As the hours passed, Elena's mind never stopped planning, never stopped dreaming, and never stopped hoping. She understood that freedom was not something given, it was something earned through courage, patience, and determination. She had survived this long, and she knew she could survive longer if it meant one day stepping into the world as her own person. Brave. She was not broken, and she was not defeated. In the depths of her despair, a spark of resilience burned bright, and it would not be extinguished. By the first light of dawn, Elena was ready to face another day, another set of chores and another challenge, but inside her something had shifted. The fire of hope had grown, the plan for escape had strengthened, and the belief in her own strength had become unshakable. She knew that one day she would break free, and when that day came, no one would ever hold her against her will again. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting golden light across the dusty fields surrounding the small town. The wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers and dry earth, a contrast to the heavy, oppressive air inside the small compound where Elena was held. She sat quietly in her corner, her eyes alert, listening to every sound that came from the outside. The previous night had left her restless, her mind filled with dreams of escape. But she had also felt a strange sense of anticipation. Something in the air had shifted, though she could not tell what. From the far end of the dirt road, the sound of hooves echoed. It was not the familiar, hurried clatter of the usual guards or townspeople. These hooves moved steadily, with purpose, striking the ground in a rhythm that seemed to announce arrival without rushing. Elena's heart quickened, but she pressed her back against the wall, hoping the sound might be someone who could help her, someone who could change the course of her life. She could not yet move freely, not until she understood who approached, but her spirit, for the first time in weeks, dared to hope. The rider appeared on the crest of the hill, silhouetted against the bright morning sun. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over his face. His eyes were sharp and observant, scanning the landscape with the skill of someone used to being both hunter and protector. The horse beneath him was calm, yet alert, sensing the tension of the moment. Elena watched in silence, her breath shallow, her body pressed against the wall as she tried to make sense of the stranger's presence. The man, Jacob, had not come to the town for idle reasons. He had traveled for days through rough terrain, following rumors of a young woman trapped in a cruel and controlling environment. He had heard whispers of her strength and determination, and he felt a sense of urgency to reach her before her spirit was completely worn down. Jacob was a man of few words, but his actions carried weight. He believed that no one deserved to be held against their will, and he had made it his mission to help those in need whenever he could. As Jacob approached the compound, he slowed his horse, observing the guards and the layout of the place. He noted the cracked windows, the weak wooden doors, and the small gaps in the fences. Every detail mattered. He needed to be careful, to plan each step precisely. Relief surged through her, but she knew the danger was far from over. They had escaped the first barrier, but there were still guards, dogs, and the wide-open terrain ahead. Jacob followed her, landing lightly beside her. He gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. "Bray. Good," he said quietly. "Now we move fast, but carefully. Stay low and keep to the shadows." They ran across the open field, the dry grass brushing against their legs, the wind whipping past their faces. Burst, but she pushed herself forward. Each step brought her closer to freedom, each heartbeat a reminder that she was no longer a prisoner. Behind them, the faint sounds of pursuit began. Shouts, barking, the unmistakable clatter of boots on hard ground. "Keep moving," Jacob urged. "We're almost clear!" Elena's mind raced. Her fear threatened to overtake her, but she focused on the path ahead, on Jacob's steady presence, and on the taste of freedom that was just within reach. They reached a small grove of trees, where the shadows offered cover. They ducked behind the thick trunks, catching their breath. Elena's chest heaved and sweat dripped down her face, but the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. Jacob looked around, ensuring no one was near. "We have to keep going," he said. "They'll be looking for us soon." "There's a safe place a few miles from here, a spot where we can rest and plan the next move. Follow me." Elena nodded again, clinging to his words. She trusted him completely now. The fear was still there, but it had been tempered by hope and courage. She followed Jacob through the dark forest, moving carefully over roots and rocks, listening for any sound that might indicate danger. Every snap of a branch made her flinch, but she kept moving, determined not to stop until she was truly free. After what felt like hours, they reached a narrow stream. The water was shallow but cold, and Jacob led her across carefully. Elena's feet slipped on the rocks, but Jacob's steady hand helped her regain balance. "Almost there," he whispered. "Just a little further, and we'll be safe for now." On the other side of the stream, a small cabin appeared in the shadows. It was old but sturdy, with thick walls and a roof that would protect them from the elements. Jacob approached the door cautiously, testing it for signs of life. Finding none, he opened it slowly and motioned for Elena to enter. Inside, the air was musty but safe. There was a small fireplace, a stack of firewood, and enough space for them to rest and recover. Elena sank to the floor, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her body ached from the climb, the running, and the constant tension of the escape. But as she looked at Jacob, she felt a sense of gratitude and relief that was almost overwhelming. Breath. She had made it. She was free. Jacob knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. "You're going to be sore tomorrow," he said, with a small smile. "But you'll be fine. You are brave, Elena." "Very brave." Tears filled Elena's eyes, and she let them fall freely for the first time since her captivity began. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't think anyone would come. I didn't think I'd ever get out."
Jacob placed a hand gently on her shoulder.
"I promised I'd help you," he said. "And I always keep my promises. But remember, you did this too. You made it through the hardest part. You had the courage to take the steps, to follow the path, to fight for yourself. That courage is yours.
Breaths. Nobody can take that away.
Elena nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride and relief.
For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt like she could breathe freely. The chains were gone, but more importantly, the chains in her mind, the fear, the despair, the hopelessness were starting to lift. They stayed in the cabin for the night, lighting a small fire and warming their hands. Jacob shared some food he had brought, and Elena ate slowly, savoring every bite. The simple act of eating without fear, without being forced, felt miraculous. For the first time, she could imagine a future where she made her own choices, where she was in control of her own life. As the fire crackled, Jacob spoke softly.
We'll need to move against.
The captor will not give up easily, but for now, rest.
Psst. You've earned it.
Elena leaned back against the wall, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. Eric and Taggy, K-pop me nam te PJ. Up a position melts a position. The god would be thy be.
But she felt a mix of exhaustion, relief, and cautious optimism. She knew the journey was not over, but she had survived the escape, and that survival had given her hope. She had been brave, and she had trusted someone who had earned that trust. That was a beginning, and beginnings had the power to change everything. As she drifted into a restless sleep, Elena felt the first true sense of freedom she had known in a long time. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with unknown dangers, but she would face it with courage and determination. She had taken the first step, and that step had led her out of chains and into the possibility of a new life. The sun had barely risen when Elena woke to the sound of birds chirping in the trees outside the small cabin. She stretched her sore muscles and rubbed her eyes, still feeling the lingering ache from the escape. Sleep had been uneasy. Every creak of the cabin and rustle of leaves had reminded her of the danger still lingering outside.
Jacob was already awake, quietly checking the area around the cabin, his eyes alert and sharp.
Elena, he said softly, turning to her. We can't stay here long.
The people who held you won't give up easily. They'll be searching for us today. Bet. Elena nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Freedom had not yet fully arrived. They were still being hunted, and every step forward required careful planning. She swallowed the fear that pressed against her chest and reminded herself that she was no longer helpless. The escape had been the first step, but survival now demanded courage, cleverness, and constant vigilance. They packed a few essential items quickly, some food, a small water bottle, and a blanket, enough to travel light but sustain them for several hours. Breaking desk. Jacob led the way, moving with quiet precision. Elena followed closely, her senses alert to every sound, every shadow, every movement. Even though the terrain was familiar in a general sense, every journey now carried a risk, and they had to be careful not to leave a trail. As they moved through the thick woods, Elena's mind replayed the events of the previous night, the climb over the fence, the rush across the open field, the frozen fear when she heard the guards shouting behind them. She had never imagined she would be capable of such bravery, and yet she had done it. She had survived. Base. She was learning step by step how to navigate danger without panic, how to rely on both her instincts and Jacob's guidance. Hours into their journey, they reached the edge of a river that stretched wide and calm in the morning light. Jacob studied the water carefully, noting the current and the depth. "We need to cross here," he said. "It's shallow, but the banks are slippery. Be careful." Breath. Elena carefully stepped into the water, the cold shock making her gasp. Her legs trembled, but she kept her balance, holding onto Jacob's hand for support.
Together they made it across, slipping and laughing nervously at the closeness of their escape. For a brief moment, the fear that had been constant for weeks was replaced by exhilaration. They were moving forward, leaving danger behind, at least for now. But danger was never far away. As they moved along the river bank, Elena heard distant shouts carried by the wind. Her heart jumped into her throat. "They are following us," she whispered, her voice tight with tension. Jacob's face hardened.
Rest.
Yes, they won't give up. We have to stay ahead, keep moving, and use the terrain to our advantage. He scanned the surroundings, noting a small grove of trees and a rocky hill nearby.
"We can use that hill for cover. They'll have trouble following us through the rocks." They moved quickly, the sound of their pursuers growing louder behind them.
Elena felt adrenaline surge through her veins, sharpening her senses. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig became a signal to move faster, to stay silent, and to trust Jacob's judgment. He led her through narrow paths, zigzagging to make their trail harder to follow. Elena marveled at his skill, realizing that his experience in navigating such dangers was the difference between life and death. Hours passed, and the pursuit grew more intense. The captor had sent more people after them, determined to regain control. Pest. Elena's legs ached. Her lungs burned, but she refused to stop. She had tasted freedom, and she would not let fear or exhaustion take it from her. Jacob encouraged her, his calm presence anchoring her panic. "Almost there," he would whisper. "Keep going, Elena. You're stronger than you think." As the sun climbed higher, they reached a rocky hill that provided a vantage point. Jacob helped Elena climb to the top, using his hands to steady her. From there, they could see the valley below, the forest stretching far and wide. The pursuers were still behind them, but the rocky terrain slowed them down, giving Elena and Jacob precious minutes. But Elena crouched, catching her breath, her heart pounding. "Do you think we can lose them?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jacob nodded. "Yes, if we keep moving, use the woods and hills, and don't make any mistakes, we can. You're learning quickly. That courage of yours, it's what will save us." Encouraged, Elena stood, her sore muscles protesting, and followed Jacob down a narrow, winding path that twisted between boulders and trees. The forest grew denser here, the sunlight filtering through thick branches, creating patterns of light and shadow that concealed their movements. Every step was careful, deliberate, and silent, as if the forest itself was helping them hide. At one point, a branch snapped under Elena's foot, and she froze, heart in her throat. Behind them, she heard a shout, but it was distant enough that Jacob believed they had not been noticed yet. "It's okay," he whispered, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Keep moving." "Don't look back." Elena nodded, swallowing her fear, and pressed on. She began to feel a growing sense of confidence. She was no longer the helpless girl from the compound. She was a survivor, a fighter. Every decision she made, every careful step she took proved that she could navigate the dangers of the world beyond her captivity. They moved for hours, stopping only briefly to drink water from a small stream and rest under the cover of trees. Jacob stayed alert, scanning the horizon for any sign of the pursuers. He taught Elena to notice subtle signs: a broken twig, footprints in the mud, changes in the birds' calls. That indicated danger or safety. She absorbed every lesson, her awareness sharpening with each passing hour. As dusk approached, they reached the edge of a small valley, where the land opened up into a wide, grassy plain. It was risky terrain, open and exposed, but it also offered a chance to put distance between them and their pursuers. "We have to cross this," Jacob said, studying the path ahead. "Stay low, move fast, and keep your eyes forward." Elena's heart raced as they sprinted across the plain, the wind rushing past her face. The shouts from behind were faint now,
growing quieter with each step. She felt a surge of exhilaration and relief. Freedom was close, but she knew they could not let their guard down. The danger might be less immediate, but it still existed. Halfway across the plain, they encountered a small group of rocks and shrubs that offered temporary cover. They crouched behind them, catching their breath, and Elena looked around at the vast landscape. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. The beauty of the moment struck her. Freedom had a price, but it was worth every struggle, every ache, every fearful heartbeat.
Jacob placed a hand gently on her shoulder.
You did it, he said quietly. You've survived every step so far.
Now, we just need to find a safe place to rest for the night, and tomorrow we can continue. Elena nodded, tears threatening to spill, but she swallowed them. Relief and quiet triumph. She had survived pursuit, navigated danger, and kept moving when every part of her body screamed to stop. For the first time, she felt truly alive, fully aware that she had reclaimed a part of herself that had been trapped for too long. They moved on carefully, finding a hidden grove at the edge of the plain where they could rest without fear of being seen. Jacob built a small fire, enough to provide warmth and light but not enough to attract attention. Elena sat beside him, her body aching but her spirit stronger than ever. Breaths. "Tomorrow," Jacob said, "we continue. We stay ahead, and eventually we reach a place where you can finally be safe. But for now, rest. You've earned it." Elena leaned against a tree, the firelight flickering across her face. She thought of the chase, the fear, the pain, and the adrenaline. Despair. She had faced danger. Ow! She had trusted someone new and found that trust was rewarded. And most importantly, she realized that the road ahead, though uncertain, was now hers to walk. She was no longer a captive. She was a fighter, a survivor, and soon she would be free in every sense of the word. The morning sun painted the sky with soft hues of pink and gold, casting light over the forest that had been Elena and Jacob's refuge for the night. Elena woke slowly, stretching her sore muscles, feeling the aches from the previous day's escape. Despite the pain, she felt a warmth in her chest that she had not experienced for months, a quiet hope that grew stronger with every step towards safety. She looked at Jacob, who was already awake and surveying the surroundings with his steady, careful gaze. "Great. It's a new day," he said softly, noticing her awake. "We keep moving, but today we'll be closer to a place where you can finally rest without fear." Elena nodded, gripping her small pack of belongings. Her journey had been long and treacherous, but she had survived every obstacle. Each challenge had taught her something new, about courage, about trust, and about the strength she had inside her. But she had always been determined. But now she realized her determination had been transformed into resilience. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead. They moved cautiously through the forest, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot, the only sound for miles. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying scents of pine, earth, and distant water. Elena felt a quiet joy in these small details, reminders that the world was bigger than the confinement she had known. Every breath she took seemed to reinforce the truth that she was no longer a prisoner. She was free, and each step she took brought her closer to a life she could call her own. Hours passed as they navigated narrow paths, crossed shallow streams, and climbed gentle hills. Jacob kept his eyes constantly alert, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Elena followed closely, her mind focused on every lesson he had taught her. Stay quiet. Observe carefully. Move with purpose. Girl. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been trapped in the compound. She was strong, capable, and determined to make it to safety. As the sun climbed higher, they reached the edge of a wide valley. In the distance, a small village appeared, smoke rising from chimneys, and the faint sound of life carried across the fields. But Elena's heart leapt. It was not yet the end of her journey, but it was a sign, a promise, that safety was within reach. Brit. She looked at Jacob, her eyes shining with cautious hope. "Is that," breath, "a town?" she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "Yes, Jacob," replied quietly. "And it's a place where you can finally rest, where you can start over. We just need to get there carefully. There may still be people searching, so we can't rush."
They made their way down into the valley, sticking to the edges of the forest and keeping out of sight of the main road.
Elena's legs ached, but she pushed through the exhaustion. Every step brought her closer to a life where she would make her own choices, speak her own words, and live without fear. The idea of independence was intoxicating, filling her with energy she had not known she still possessed. As they entered the outskirts of the village, Jacob guided Elena to a small, hidden path that led to a modest inn. The building was sturdy, welcoming, and seemed to promise safety without question. Jacob knocked quietly, and a kind-looking woman opened the door, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the two travelers. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice gentle. Jacob spoke quickly, explaining that Elena needed a safe place to rest and recover, someone to trust who could offer protection. The woman nodded, understanding the urgency in his words, and invited them inside. Elena's heart lifted. For the first time, someone had not asked questions about why she was running, who had taken her, or what had happened. They only offered safety, warmth, and kindness. Inside the small inn room, Elena sank onto the bed, exhaustion finally taking hold. Jacob stayed nearby, sitting on a chair, keeping watch. "You're safe here," he said. "No one will harm you in this place." For the first time in a long time, you can rest." Elena closed her eyes, feeling tears well up. It was a mix of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. After months of fear and struggle, after the endless weight of captivity and the tension of escape, she had made it. She had survived. She was free. The following days were a slow adjustment. Elena learned to move freely without fear, to eat without anxiety, and to sleep without waking at every sound. Jacob helped her find ways to integrate into the village, showing her places where she could work, shop, and meet people safely. The kindness of strangers and the simplicity of daily life were almost overwhelming at first, but Elena embraced every moment. Each small step toward normalcy strengthened her confidence and her belief in a future she had almost thought impossible. She found work in a small bakery, kneading dough and helping customers with smiles that grew more genuine each day. The rhythm of work, the warmth of the ovens, and the laughter of friendly neighbors filled a space in her heart that had been empty for far too long. Elena discovered that she could enjoy life again, that she could laugh, and that she could feel joy without fear, lurking in the background. Jacob stayed nearby, offering support when needed, but he gave her space to grow, understanding that her independence was now as important as her safety. Elena began to explore the village, meet new people, and make small connections that reminded her of the world she had once known. She started to dream again, planning for a future filled with choices, freedom, and possibilities. One evening, as the sun set over the village, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Elena walked along a quiet path near the river. She paused, taking in the beauty around her, the sound of flowing water, the rustle of leaves, and the warm glow of lights in nearby cottages. She realized how far she had come, from the fear and chains of the past to the freedom and safety of the present. Her heart swelled with gratitude and hope. Elena had been through unimaginable hardship, but it had taught her something invaluable. Strength comes not from the absence of fear, but from facing it and moving forward anyway. She had fought for her freedom, trusted when it was hard to trust, and persevered when every step felt impossible. The chains were gone, but the courage they had awakened in her remained, shining brighter than ever. As night fell, Elena returned to the inn, sitting by the window and looking out at the quiet village. She thought about the journey, the escape, the chase, the moments of doubt and the small victories along the way. She thought about Jacob, whose guidance and trust had helped her navigate the most dangerous parts of her journey. And most of all, she thought about herself, the strength she had discovered, the hope she had nurtured, and the freedom she had earned. Her house, she whispered softly to herself, a declaration more powerful than any scream she had ever made.
I am free! I am alive!
And I will live my life on my own terms. Elena knew that challenges might still arise, that life would not always be easy, but she no longer feared them. She had faced the worst, and she had survived. She had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her spirit. And in that moment, she realized something profound. Freedom was not just the absence of chains, it was the courage to choose, to trust, and to move forward no matter what. Inspiration. And so, in the quiet of the village, with the stars beginning to shine overhead, Elena began the next chapter of her life, one filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of a future she had fought so hard to reach. She had survived, she had endured, and she had triumphed. And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed in the possibilities of tomorrow.